I don't know where you stand on this, but for example, the organisation PETA talks pretty much just about animal welfare in general, not necessarily about animal food welfare. And one of the things I've always been fascinated in is animal welfare. So for example, let me give you an example. PETA, my understanding is they wouldn't be that keen on, killing any animal really. Yet here in New Zealand at the moment, we used to have no mammals. We used to be in, 1,000 years ago, an islands of birds only. We have a problem with possums at the moment. I would like to see every possum in New Zealand eradicated tomorrow, every stoat eradicated, every rat eradicated for the sake of our bird population. When we're talking about animal welfare and we have to make a choice like that, because possums, for example, in maybe Australia or America are protected, one of those places, here they're a pest. I would like to see them wiped off the face of, not the planet, but of this country. When you're talking about animal welfare, when you're talking about animal ethics, how do those kind of questions come in? I want to, if I see a possum on the road, I will run over it because I want to save perhaps the tui's the tui chicks that it would have gone and raided the nest of. Ethically speaking, from your perspective, how do we make those calls?
Yeah. So I think first of all, this division of animals into sort of species that we will call pests or vermin, I think is a way of often trying to sort of mask what we're doing to individual animals. So just as we would be concerned about labeling particular human groups with problematic names in order to justify bad treatment of them, I think we should just be careful about that kind of language to start with. Second, I absolutely recognize that to protect particular species of animals like ground nesting birds, it might be necessary to make interventions that undo the kinds of things that English colonialists did and other colonialists introducing animals into the wrong place, and that has created big problems. So I would be really keen if we could find more humane ways of addressing those issues, because I think the lives of those animals that are in the wrong place, as far as we're concerned, are valuable too. So if it was possible to rehome them somewhere where they were not doing the same damage.
If you've got 30,000 possums in a sector of forest, though, I mean, when you say humane, I mean, Doc and those kinds of places have those gas chambers that basically go straight into their brain and they're dead. It seems to be a fairly humane way to do if there is such a thing. But I guess you don't sound like you're in this camp, but there are some people. It's interesting, actually. It sounds like you're kind of equating the value of an animal life to the value of a human life. Because when you said pests, vermin, when we call animals like that, it's like when people attribute negative names to humans. Do you personally consider the species, the human species and the animal species, sort of equal? Like, are we on an equal plane?
No, I don't want to think about humans and other animals as equal. So Peter Singer has a slogan in his animal liberation book: "All animals are equal." Yeah. And turns out he doesn't quite mean that.
Because then, if that's the case, do you start to ask questions like, and I'm being a little bit pedantic here, but you go like, well, I'm at the beach and I go like that, and I've just killed a sandfly. That's an animal. Well, so if all animals are equal. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
So I don't think that we ought to think about the humans and other animals in terms of equality, but I do think we ought to be thinking much more carefully than we're currently doing about commonality between humans and other animals. And a lot of our thinking has put humans in one category and every other kind of animal in another category. And that's served us really, really poorly. So this category of animals, when we mean non-human animals, puts chimpanzees, who are share with us 98.5% of DNA, and the sandfly that you just referred to, as if there was some meaningful category in which it made sense to lump all them together that didn't include us. And so that human animal binary, I think, has been massively problematic in Western traditions of thinking, philosophical and theological, and we need to be thinking across that boundary.
Does that mean there is a hierarchy of importance and value amongst the animal kingdom then? So, for example, the sandfly, we're not worried about the chimpanzee, very different?
I'm worried about the sandfly.
You are worried about the sandfly too?
I would prefer...
Bless you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
I would prefer next time at the beach, if you see a sandfly on your arm, that you're sort of brushing the sandfly gently off.
I guess it's more of a reaction than anything else. But then, I mean, like, gosh. So are you someone that if you had rats in your house, you'd try and rehome them somewhere? as opposed to just knock them on the
Well,
head.
funny you should mention that, because
I got to say that I didn't mean that to sound as aggressive as it came out. I'm genuinely interested.
That's fine. So there's a bit of an odour coming from the cavity wall at the back of our kitchen just at the moment.
Yep.
And probably from sounds of bits of scurrying, somehow the mice have got in and are chewing up the insulation between our cavity wall. My wife's a bit more sensitive to the smell than I am.
Yep.
And so we've got a problem. I would really like not to be calling the pest control officer, and I really don't want to put down poison. I would really like to humanely trap the mice and then find somewhere better for them to live. Yeah,
but what does that mean, somewhere better? Doesn't that just mean giving that problem to someone else?
Well, no, because I don't think mice are a problem living in lots of places.
Well, then why are you moving them if they're not a problem?
So it might be a problem it might be a problem for mice to live in my cavity wall, but it might not be a problem for them to live in the oak tree down the road.
It sounds like NIMBY, not in my backyard. But yeah, okay. I mean, look, I get it. It's a really interesting perspective. We kind of came away from that conversation around possums. What I hear, obviously, it's impossible to rehome and rehouse the possums, but it sounds like you're also saying that it may not be your most favoured outcome, but if they were culled humanely for the sake, let's say, of our kiwi, that would be something you'd begrudgingly accept.
So on Hebridean Island, off the coast of Scotland, there was a problem with hedgehogs that were eating eggs of ground nesting birds, and there was a campaign to, instead of just killing the hedgehogs, relocating them to the mainland. That seems to me to be a good idea.
Yep.
I'd be in favour of a kind of hedgehog sanctuary if that were necessary. I need to know more about the New Zealand context, because one of the things I've been struck by is that I've discovered that rats didn't come to New Zealand with the European colonists. Rats came either through Polynesian or Maori settlement and have been in New Zealand for since at least 1200. Mm-hmm. So that suggests to me, and again I need to know much more about this. I need to talk to more people. But it suggests that rats and ground nesting birds have been coexisting in New Zealand for about 800 years. And so I'm interested as to how that's the case. And someone suggested to me
we need to give our mate a call. He's a ground nesting doctorate and ground nesting.
Okay. Mike Dickerson.
That'd be good. So I don't know if there's different kinds of rats that came with the European colonists than came with the Maori, but it's striking to me that there does seem to be that coexistence between mammals and ground nesting birds for all that time.
But when you say coexistence, what that means with those animals, which often are referred to as invasive pests, it means, for example, you go somewhere you haven't got a lot of time in Dunedin, but you go out to Orokonui Sanctuary, or you go to Tirutiri Matangi in Auckland, or even though there are lots of pests out there, you go to Great Barrier Island and you see what this place used to be, and they may have coexisted over 800 years, if that is indeed the case, but massively detrimentally into the, I don't know about extinction, but certainly the devastating effect of the thing that made this country a unique part of the world, which was, other than a bat and a couple of other things, basically we were birds and birds alone. Mm-hmm. People often say to me, and we've had this conversation here, if you had a time machine, what would you do? And it would be like, I'd go 1,000 years ago right here. I just want to know what it was like in New Zealand when we were birds alone. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, Māori have a perspective of being of the land. I also consider saying I was born here and I'm not Māori, but I'm part of the story. I'm part of the New Zealand story, and maybe it's wrong and maybe it's tribal, but you give me a kiwi or a possum, I'm picking the kiwi every time, or the tui or the bellboard or the piwaka waka or the moorpork or the whatever. And if I could wave a magic wand and bring them back to like they were, I wouldn't think twice about losing all those animals that are sometimes referred to as invasive pests.
Okay, but and you've heard me say that I think programs to enable birds to be thriving in different contexts, even if that's at the at the cost of mammals. I'm aware we need to make compromise.
Yeah,
but we're very, very tunnel-minded in relation to the kinds of animals that we're paying attention to. So as I was flying into Dunedin, what I'm looking at is a landscape where you've got sort of green rolling sward on hills, and then you've got lots of green pasture. And so if you compare that to what would have been the case when European colonists arrived, you had Maori, you did have really sophisticated Maori agriculture, so arable crops, but what we've done is displaced them by bringing the cattle and the sheep, and they've transformed the landscape.
Agreed.
They've massively impacted on the biodiversity of New Zealand, and the numbers of animals now being raised is also having very substantial impacts on native animals. And so we need to be paying attention to this kind of invasive species too.
So does that mean that it's almost too little too late? Because what we've allowed and what we put up with now means we can't have it the other way. You mentioned hedgehogs. Hedgehogs is always the example of, I'm like, what the fuck were we thinking? Because who bought a hedgehog? And the answer, I'm pretty sure I've read this, is some English lady wanted her backyard to feel like her backyard. I mean, I can understand why sheep and goats and pigs and were bought here for food. I understand that. But who the hell bought a hedgehog? I mean, what purpose did that serve? That's the one that I always kind of go, oh, rats got here and they snuck onto the ships and stuff, but the hedgehog, that's what that frustrates me most of all.
So, but can I say, you say too little too late, and I really think that's wrong.
I'm just talking about getting back a bigger percentage of what this country would have been, and taking back some power from the unwanted invasive pests, and I guess what you're also talking about is the welcomed invasive pests. Yeah,
and so I think it's really clear. So it's really clear globally we need to be consuming and raising a lot fewer animals than we're currently doing. So in New Zealand, about half of the carbon emissions comes from animal agriculture, unsurprisingly, given the vast numbers of animals now being raised here. So globally and in individual countries, we need a transition to less animal agriculture. And the great news is that we can grow plant alternatives on much less land that's currently being used for animals, and that means we've got the potential to keep humans fed, but rewild areas and make land available that was taken away from wild animals and birds in New Zealand.